any debts at all. But technically, everybody, if you align all the private debt, all the cards, all the store cards, all the credit cards, and all the money to rescue the private sector banks, NatWest is 70% state-owned, you own it, but you have no say over its executives. Why did they adopt these state socialist measures in the last year or two? It was to save the economic system as it presently exists. Because if those banks had gone down, you could have 10% unemployed, 20% unemployed, 30% unemployed. The town where I am, about 25% of all retail outlets will fail in the next year to year and a half. And not only will we have one recession, we will have one recession which in my opinion will last till the end of this year, then there'll be a minor blip about which the media will go berserk, and then we'll be hit by another recession. It's the W effect, the two dips, as economists call it. And we will keep going down, one recession following another. The model for many Western countries that are strapped on debt and leveraged out to their eyeballs and have lived like drug addicts on easy and trash money is Japan. Japan's been in recession for about 17 years, where they just bumble along and grind along. They can have a life, but there is no growth particularly. And the interesting thing is that we have an enormous population now, which is set to rise from 60 million, its present load, to 70 million by the middle of this century. Blunkett, remember Blunkett, before all those affairs and all that nonsense? When Blunkett was Home Secretary in the early stages of New Labour, he said there is no natural end to immigration, he said. No natural end. Well, no natural end means radical minority status for us in this society in 50 to 60 years. And the turnaround window is 20 years. The turnaround window is 20 years. And in many areas of the country, we're in a minority now. And it's not much fun being a minority, particularly when you've been allegedly top dog and been majoritarian in the past. Because then you have to use political correctness and all of these games to protect yourself, because they're really insurance policies that you use as armour in relation to other infractions and other groups and people that put things on you. You want a bit for your culture, a bit for your music, a bit for your architecture, a bit for your ancestry, a bit for your flag, and you get a bit, you get a slice, you get a token. And you have to be pleased with that, because that's all you're going to get in a group-based society, as this has now become. Because the old class fissures of the past have largely been replaced by ethnic, racial, communitarian and group-based tensions, the like of which will always be exacerbated when the economy goes down rather than up, and when tension between groups rises as a result of the fact they're all different, they're all chafing against each other, and they're all looking at a receding socio-economic pot. Our elite has gone global and doesn't really think in terms of this society's benefit anymore. Most Labour and Tory politicians, with the Liberals feeding ideas into them from the centre of the spectrum, think of themselves as citizens of the world. A man like Blair or Brown has more in common with Obama, more in common with a leading banker in China than they actually have with people here in Greenwich. They think of England and Britain as a puddle that they step beyond to a world-like type pseudo-government vested in the UN and these other international meetings at the G9, G20, G40 and so on, and all of these other congresses that they spend most of their time attending. They think that world management is what they're about. That's partly what these foreign wars are about. And don't forget that we are living now in a system that has taken 40 years to build. Capital and money goes all around the world. A man with a screen in the City of London or a big exchange in Leeds can put his thumb on the screen and send $10 million or pounds or euros or any currency, yuan, Chinese currency, across the world. But if money moves across the world, labour moves across the world to fit in with the path of money. And labour is immigration. And immigration moves across continents and across boundaries and across borders, following the money, seeking it out, doing jobs at lower than the minimum wage, brought in by intermediate third parties and pre-structured so to do. Mass immigration is a pool of semi-unemployed, skilled to unskilled labour that undercuts the value of labour and keeps it at a median or lower than median level. It's so you get this enormous boom and bust economy fuelled by credit, where if you want a pizza at 3 a.m, it will be dispatched to you by an Albanian on a small motorbike. And it's this economy that you then pay for by a credit card. and you manifest that transaction again and again and again, and you add 100 and 1,000 and 10,000 and 10 million transactions of that sort on top, and you have an economy where no one really makes anything except things which are instantly consumed. Because we have no steel industry anymore, no coal industry anymore, no car industry anymore. We virtually don't make anything anymore. We process the nuclear waste of other people. Somebody once drove me through the industrial area of Liverpool, and there's nothing left. The only factory that was left that was British was making bouncy castles. That's all we produce. This was a great imperial city based upon the wealth of slavery, a city of power. Look at the neoclassical and classical architecture as you go around the centre of Liverpool. Denigrated now, but an enormous Victorian city like Manchester of empire and power. These cities are on the last legs now, blitzed and destroyed. Full of immigrants in the centre. There's an enormous Somali population in the centre of Liverpool, in Tuxted. Why are they there? They're there because of the Genocide Act that was passed by the United Nations in 1948. We signed up to that then. Somalia hasn't had a state for 35 years. It's just militias and armed semi-Islamist gangs roaming around. Almost anyone can claim asylum because it's such a horrifying life. Don't forget, tens of thousands of people have claimed asylum in Iraq. At least 1 million Iraqis have been killed and 2 to 4 million have been displaced. And there's tens of thousands who want to get into this country because they say they're a Wazili or they're Christian or they're a particular type of minority, they face persecution. We should give them the right of settlement because we invaded their country on behalf of the Americans and blew large parts of it to bits. And many groups have a claim on Western societies and can turn up, and their claim has to be seriously considered in inverted commas because we've signed up again and again and again to more and more laws which prevent us from doing anything. Prevent us from doing anything to manage our own country in our own interest in an effective manner. Cameron's gang will probably take over within a year, and he will do nothing about any of these things. Nothing about any of them. Cameron is a member of United Against Fascism, or UAF. We're extraordinary to have a Tory member of the UAF. It's quite unbelievable. In the past, you have to say that Tory leaders would have been a step too far. Associated with neo-communist and Trotskyist groups who plausibly, deniably advocate violence and so on. That would have been, for sort of a posh so-and-so like Cameron, a step too far in the past. But not now. It's just a politically correct gesture that he's making in towards middling voters. But all of these middling voters have a secret fear. And the thing that this party must do, particularly with people who have a stake in the society, particularly with middling and bourgeois persons, is to tell them, do you want to be in a minority 50 years from now? Because secretly and semi-secretly, none of them do. None of them do. Because although everyone's traumatised about these issues and this party is very demonised in the mass media, except to a degree on the internet, everyone when they meet, and most of our people are totally apolitical, but when they meet, they talk about these issues. They don't talk about what the elite talks about. They talk about these issues. They talk about crime in South London. They talk about the fact that in many of our towns, we're only 50% of the population. 50% of the population. And it will get worse unless people make a definite political choice to make it better. The Islamist threat and the bombings which were celebrated 3 years back, in the sense of remembered and celebrated, with these steel poles, if you notice, in this park near Tavistock Square. I know somebody who was in Tavistock Square when the bus bomb went off 3 years ago. When an explosion happens above ground, there's this very artificial crack, this sort of crack that isn't a natural sound. And everyone freezes and wonders what it is. And that whole bus had been blown out and the roof had come in and then blown off and all the glass had gone out and all the rest of it. And there seemed to be nobody in it because all the charred bodies were on the ground or on the floor of the bus and so on. Now, these Islamist movements, many of whose activities have been broken up by the security services, it appears, relatively successfully, because the will was certainly there and quite a few of these plots have been broken up. Nevertheless, they see this society as prey. They see it as easy pickings because they look on us and have a double take. Islamists like them in the third world think of the